The world felt like it was collapsing under the weight of silence, and Ethan Carter was suffocating in it. At 17, he stood in the cracked mirror of his family's trailer in rural Ohio, practicing a smile that didn't belong to him. It was a mask he'd worn so long it felt like his own skin, but it itched, burned, and begged to be torn off. Ethan's family was dirt poor, scraping by on his father's mechanic wages and his mother's late-night shifts at the diner. The trailer groaned under the weight of their struggles, bills piled on the counter, threats of eviction taped to the door. In their small, conservative town, survival meant blending in, and for Ethan, that meant burying who he was. He was gay, a truth he'd known since he was 12, but in a place where slurs were slung like greetings and church sermons preached fire and brimstone, he learned to act straight. It was a performance he perfected. Deep voice, firm handshake, eyes that never lingered too long on another boy. But every night, alone in his bunk, he whispered his secret to the dark, praying it wouldn't destroy him. High school was a battlefield. Ethan was tall, lean, with tousled brown hair and green eyes that held too much. He was good at football, good enough to earn a grudging respect from the jocks who'd otherwise sense his difference. But respect came at a cost. He dated Sarah, the cheerleader with a kind smile, because it was expected. She deserved better than his half-hearted affection, but he didn't know how to let her go without unraveling the lie he lived. Every touch felt like a betrayal, not just of her, but of himself. Then came Lucas Hayes. Lucas was new, a transfer student from Chicago with soft blonde curls and a quiet confidence that made Ethan's heart stutter. Lucas didn't swagger like the other boys. He carried himself with an ease that felt dangerous, like he knew something the rest of the world didn't. In English class, when Lucas read aloud from Walt Whitman, his voice was a melody, and Ethan felt the words pierce him. We two boys together clinging, one the other never leaving. He looked away, heat rising in his cheeks, terrified Lucas might see the longing in his eyes. Their first real conversation happened by accident. Ethan was fixing a flat tire on his bike behind the school when Lucas appeared, offering a wrench from his backpack. You look like you're fighting a war with that thing, Lucas said, his smile teasing but warm. Ethan mumbled a reply, his hands trembling, not from the bike, but from the way Lucas's blue eyes held his, steady and unafraid. They talked about nothing, school, the weather, the town's obsession with Friday night football, but it felt like everything. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like he was performing. Days turned into weeks, and their friendship grew in stolen moments. Lunches in the library, walks home along the railroad tracks, late-night texts about music and dreams. Lucas was open about who he was, unapologetically gay, though he kept it quiet in this town, where difference was a sin. Ethan envied his courage, but feared it too. How do you do it? Ethan asked one night, sitting on the hood of an abandoned car in a junkyard, the stars above them sharp and bright. How do you just be yourself? Lucas shrugged, his breath visible in the cold air. I decided a long time ago that hiding hurts more than the truth. But it's not easy. Never is. He looked at Ethan, his gaze soft but piercing. You don't have to hide forever, you know. Ethan wanted to believe him, but fear was a heavy chain. His father's voice echoed in his mind, harsh words about sinners and weakness. His mother's tired eyes, always pleading for peace, kept him silent. If he came out, he'd lose them. He'd lose everything. The trailer, the only home he'd ever known, would be gone. He'd be an outcast in a town that already chewed up anyone who didn't fit. But Lucas was a crack in the armor Ethan had built. One evening, by the lake, they sat on a dock, the water lapping softly beneath them. Lucas's hand brushed against Ethan's, and instead of pulling away, Ethan let it linger. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. Instead, there was warmth, a quiet electricity that made Ethan feel alive for the first time in years. I'm scared, he whispered, his voice breaking. I know, Lucas said, his fingers intertwining with Ethan's. But you're not alone. That moment was a turning point, but it wasn't freedom. Not yet. The town was watching, always watching. Rumors spread like wildfire, and Ethan's carefully constructed mask began to crack. A teammate caught them laughing too closely in the locker room, and the whisper started. "Faggot," someone muttered in the hallway, loud enough for Ethan to hear. His stomach twisted, but Lucas just squeezed his hand under the table at lunch. A silent promise. "We'll get through this." By the end of the first 1,000 words, Ethan was teetering on the edge of a choice. He could keep hiding, keep pretending, and maybe survive high school with his family intact. Or he could take Lucas's hand, step into the truth, and risk everything. The weight of that decision pressed down on him, heavier than the poverty that shaped his life, heavier than the fear that kept him silent. But in Lucas's eyes, he saw something new, a future where he didn't have to act straight, where he could build a life of softness and courage. The air in Ethan's trailer was thick with tension, the kind that clung to the walls like damp rot. His father, Tom, sat at the kitchen table, a beer in hand, his eyes narrowed as he grilled Ethan about his day. "You've been hanging with that new kid too much," Tom said, his voice low and sharp. "People talk, Ethan. You gotta be careful." Ethan's heart pounded, but he nodded, muttering, "Just friends, Dad." The lie tasted bitter, but it was safer than the truth. His mother, Ellen, stood at the sink, scrubbing dishes with a ferocity that betrayed her anxiety. She didn't look at Ethan, but her silence screamed louder than words. They needed him to be the son they could afford, one who didn't stir trouble, one who kept the family's fragile peace. School became a tighter rope to walk. The whispers grew louder, and Ethan felt eyes on him everywhere. In the cafeteria, the gym, even the quiet corners of the library where he and Lucas stole moments to talk. Lucas, with his unshakable calm, seemed to weather the storm better, but Ethan saw the strain in his eyes too. "They're just words," Lucas said one day, leaning against a tree during lunch. "They can't touch us unless we let them." But words were weapons in a town like this. Ethan's teammate, Jake, cornered him after practice, his face twisted with suspicion. "You and that Hayes kid, you think we're stupid? We see how you look at him." Ethan's fists clenched, but he didn't swing. He couldn't. One wrong move, and the whole town would know. He'd lose his spot on the team, his scholarship hopes, his family's trust. He walked away, jaw tight, but Jake's laughter followed him. That night, Ethan snuck out to meet Lucas by the lake again. The moonlight painted the water silver, and Lucas was waiting, his hoodie pulled tight against the autumn chill. "You okay?" Lucas asked, his voice soft but urgent. Ethan shook his head, unable to speak. The weight of the day, of the lies, the fear, the longing, crashed over him. He sank to the ground, and Lucas knelt beside him, pulling him into a hug. It was the first time Ethan had been held like that, like he was something precious, not something broken. "I can't keep doing this," Ethan whispered. "I'm losing myself." "Then don't," Lucas said, his voice fierce. "You're stronger than you think, Ethan. You don't have to be what they want." But strength felt like a luxury Ethan couldn't afford. The next day, disaster struck. Sarah, his girlfriend, confronted him in the school parking lot, her eyes red with tears. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "About you and Lucas?" Ethan froze, his carefully built world crumbling. Someone had seen them by the lake, had twisted their moment of vulnerability into gossip that spread like poison. Sarah didn't wait for an answer. She walked away, and Ethan knew he'd hurt her, not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't be honest. The fallout was swift. By the next morning, the rumors were everywhere. Ethan's locker was vandalized with slurs, and the football team iced him out. Coach pulled him aside, his face grim. "You're a distraction, Carter. Fix this, or you're off the team." Ethan nodded, his throat tight, but inside he was screaming. Fix what? His heart? His truth? Lucas found him in the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face to hide the panic. "We can leave," Lucas said, his voice low but steady. "After graduation, we can go somewhere else, somewhere we don't have to hide." It was a dream, but Ethan clung to it, even as fear gnawed at him. Leaving meant abandoning his family, who needed him to be their anchor. His little sister, Lily, was only 10, and the thought of her growing up in that trailer without him broke his heart. That night, Ethan came home to find his father waiting. Tom's face was a storm cloud, and a crumpled note from school, detailing the incident with Sarah, was clutched in his hand. "Is this who you are?" Tom roared, slamming the note on the table. "You gonna shame us like this?" Ellen stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't speak. Ethan wanted to scream, to tell them he was still their son, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he ran, out the door into the night, until he reached Lucas's house. Lucas's parents were gone for the weekend, and the small, tidy house felt like a sanctuary. Lucas pulled Ethan inside, locking the door behind them. "You're safe here," he said, but Ethan didn't feel safe. He felt like a fugitive in his own life. They sat on the couch, and Lucas held his hand, not pushing, just waiting. "I love you," Lucas said, the words simple but earth-shattering. Ethan's breath caught, and for the first time, he let himself say it back. "I love you too." It was a moment of softness in a world of sharp edges, but it couldn't last. The town was closing in, and Ethan knew he had to make a choice, his family or his truth. The weight of it was crushing, but Lucas's hand in his was a lifeline, pulling him toward a life he'd never dared imagine. The days after Ethan's confrontation with his father were a blur of dread and defiance. He stayed with Lucas, sleeping on the couch, avoiding home where the air was too thick to breathe. Lucas's house was a refuge, but it wasn't home. Not yet. Ethan's phone buzzed with missed calls from his mother, but he couldn't face her, not after the betrayal in her silence. He felt like a traitor for running, but staying would have meant surrendering who he was. School was worse. The slurs on his locker were scrubbed clean, but the hostility lingered. Jake and his cronies tripped him in the hallway, their laughter sharp as knives. Ethan kept his head down, but Lucas refused to hide. During lunch, when a group of seniors jeered at them, Lucas stood, his voice cutting through the noise. "You got a problem? Say it to my face." The cafeteria went silent, and for a moment, Ethan saw the boy he loved as a warrior, fearless in a way he couldn't yet be. But courage came at a cost. That afternoon, Lucas was jumped behind the school. Ethan found him by the bleachers, his lip bloody, his hoodie torn. "I'm fine," Lucas said, but his eyes were dark with pain. Ethan's hands shook as he helped him up, rage and guilt warring inside him. "This is my fault," he said, his voice breaking. Lucas grabbed his face, forcing him to meet his gaze. "No, this is their fault. Don't let them win." The words lit a spark in Ethan, but it flickered against the weight of his reality. He returned home that night, unable to avoid it any longer. His father was gone, working a late shift, but his mother was waiting. Ellen's face was pale, her hands wringing a dish towel. "You can't keep running, Ethan," she said softly. "This family, we need you." Her words cut deep, but they didn't erase the memory of her silence when Tom raged. "Do you need me, Mom? Or do you need the lie I've been living?" he asked. She had no answer, and that hurt more than any shout. The next week was a test of endurance. Ethan was benched from the football team, his scholarship dreams fading. Lucas's parents, back from their trip, welcomed Ethan but urged him to make peace with his family. "They're scared," Lucas's mom said over dinner, her voice kind but firm. "But they love you. Give them time." Ethan wanted to believe her, but time felt like a luxury he didn't have. The breaking point came at a town fair, where Ethan and Lucas went to escape the suffocation of school. The fair was a riot of lights and laughter, but for Ethan, it was a minefield. They kept their distance, pretending to be just friends, but the effort was exhausting. Then, in a quiet moment by the Ferris wheel, Lucas slipped his hand into Ethan's. "Dance with me," he whispered, nodding to a slow song playing nearby. Ethan froze, fear choking him, but Lucas's smile was a dare he couldn't resist. They swayed together, hidden in the crowd, and for those fleeting minutes, Ethan felt free. But freedom was fragile. Jake and his friends spotted them, their shouts cutting through the music. "Freaks!" they yelled, drawing a crowd. Ethan's heart raced, but Lucas held his ground, pulling Ethan closer. "Let them stare," he said. The confrontation ended without violence, but the damage was done. By morning, the town was buzzing, and Ethan's father was waiting when he got home. "You're throwing everything away," Tom said, his voice low but venomous. "For what?" "Some kid." Ethan's chest tightened, but something snapped inside him. "Not some kid," he said, his voice steady for the first time. "The person I love. And I'm done pretending I don't." The words hung in the air, a declaration that felt like both a wound and a release. Tom stared, his face unreadable, then walked out, slamming the door. Ethan expected to feel broken, but instead, he felt lighter. He went to Lucas, and they sat by the lake again, the same dock where their hands first touched. "I told him," Ethan said, his voice trembling but proud. Lucas's eyes shone with tears, but he smiled. "You're so brave," he said, and Ethan believed him, even if he didn't feel it yet. The town didn't change, but Ethan did. He started speaking up, calling out the slurs, standing taller beside Lucas. It wasn't easy. Friends turned away, his sister cried when she heard the whispers, but Ethan felt the chains loosening. He was building something new, something honest, even as the world around him fought to keep him small. Winter came, and with it, a cold that seeped into Ethan's bones. The trailer felt emptier without his father's presence. Tom had taken to staying out late, avoiding the sun he couldn't understand. Ellen tried to bridge the gap, cooking Ethan's favorite meals, but her eyes were always searching for the boy he used to pretend to be. Ethan wanted to scream that he was still here, still her son, but the words caught in his throat. School was a gauntlet, but Ethan and Lucas faced it together. They carved out a fragile space for themselves, study sessions at Lucas's house, walks where no one could see. Lucas's parents became Ethan's second family, offering warmth and acceptance he craved. But the town's judgment was relentless. A local pastor preached against sinful lifestyles at church, and Ethan felt the weight of every stare. He stopped going to services, but his mother's disappointed sighs followed him. Hope came in the form of a college acceptance letter. Lucas had applied to a small liberal arts school in New York, and to Ethan's shock, he'd been accepted too, with a partial scholarship. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a lifeline. "We could start over," Lucas said, his eyes bright with possibility. "A place where we don't have to hide." Ethan wanted it so badly it hurt, but the thought of leaving his sister behind twisted his heart. Lily was growing up in a house of tension, and Ethan feared what his absence would mean for her. One night, Ethan found Lily crying in her room, clutching a stuffed bear he'd won her at a fair years ago. "Are you leaving because of me?" she asked, her voice small. Ethan's throat tightened. "No, Lil," he said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm leaving so I can be me. But I'll always come back for you." He promised to call, to visit, to be the brother she needed, even from afar. It wasn't enough, but it was all he had. The decision to leave wasn't easy. Ethan worked extra shifts at the gas station, saving every penny for college. Lucas helped, tutoring kids for extra cash, and together they planned a future that felt like a dream. But the present was still a battle. At a school assembly, Jake and his friends heckled Ethan and Lucas, their words vicious. Ethan stood, ready to fight, but Lucas grabbed his arm. "They're not worth it," he said. "We're bigger than this place." The turning point came in spring at the senior prom. Ethan and Lucas decided to go together, a bold act of defiance. They arrived hand in hand, Ethan in a borrowed suit, Lucas in a sharp blazer. The gym fell silent, then erupted in whispers. Some stared with hatred, others with curiosity, but a few, Sarah among them, smiled. She approached them, her voice soft. "I'm happy for you, Ethan. Really. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a victory." They danced, and for the first time, Ethan didn't care who was watching. The music wrapped around them, and Lucas's laughter was a shield against the world. But the night wasn't perfect. Jake and his crew waited outside, and when Ethan and Lucas left, they were there, fists ready. Ethan took a punch to the jaw before he fought back, protecting Lucas. Teachers broke it up, but the damage was done. Ethan's face was bruised, and the town's hatred was laid bare. The next day, Ethan's father finally spoke. "You're my son," Tom said, his voice gruff but softer than before. "I don't get it, but I don't want to lose you." It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a start. Ellen hugged Ethan, tears in her eyes, and for the first time, he felt like they might see him, the real him. As graduation loomed, Ethan and Lucas made plans. They'd work through the summer, save money, and move to New York together. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs. Ethan looked at Lucas, his heart full, and realized he was no longer the boy who hid in the mirror. He was building a life of softness and courage, one step at a time. Summer in Ohio was a haze of heat and hope. Ethan and Lucas worked tirelessly. Ethan at the gas station, Lucas at a local bookstore, saving every dollar for their escape to New York. The trailer was still home, but it felt less like a prison. Tom was trying, in his gruff way, to understand. He'd sit with Ethan some nights, asking halting questions about Lucas about college. Ellen started smiling again, slipping extra food onto Ethan's plate, a silent apology for her earlier silence. Lily, now 11, became their biggest cheerleader, drawing pictures of Ethan and Lucas in a big city, free and happy. But freedom wasn't won yet. The town's judgment lingered, and Ethan felt it every time he walked past the church or the diner. Old friends avoided him, but new ones emerged. Kids who'd been quiet before, who saw Ethan's courage and found their own. A girl named Mia, who'd come out as bi, thanked Ethan one day, her voice shy. "You made it feel possible," she said. Ethan didn't feel like a hero, but her words stayed with him. The day before they left for New York, Ethan and Lucas returned to the lake, their dock, their sanctuary. The sun was setting, painting the water gold, and they sat close, hands intertwined. "We did it," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're getting out." Ethan nodded, but his heart was heavy. He was leaving his family, his sister, the only world he'd ever known. But he was also gaining something, a life where he could be himself, where love didn't have to hide. They moved to New York in August, a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, their new home. It was cramped, the walls thin, but it was theirs. Ethan found a job at a coffee shop, Lucas at a library, and they enrolled in college. Their scholarships stretched thin, but enough. The city was overwhelming, loud, bright, alive, but it embraced them. They walked hand in hand down crowded streets, kissed in public without fear, and built a life that felt like a miracle. Years later, Ethan would look back on that Ohio town and see it for what it was, a crucible that forged him. He and Lucas stayed together, their love growing through fights and laughter, through late-night study sessions and quiet mornings. Ethan became a teacher, Lucas a writer, and they built a home filled with softness, soft words, soft touches, soft dreams. Lily visited every summer, her eyes wide with pride for her brother. Tom and Ellen came once, awkward but trying, and Ethan saw in their eyes a love that had finally learned to bend. The world wasn't perfect. Hate still existed, in New York and beyond. But Ethan had learned to stand tall, to love fiercely, to live without shame. He thought of that boy in the trailer, practicing a smile that wasn't his, and wished he could tell him, "You'll be okay. You'll build a life worth living." On their 5th anniversary, Ethan and Lucas returned to the lake in Ohio, just for a day. The dock was still there, weathered but standing. They sat, hands clasped, and Ethan carved their initials into the wood, a quiet claim on the place that had both broken and made him. "We're still here," Lucas said, his voice a vow. Ethan smiled, his heart full. They'd faced poverty, fear, and hatred, but they'd built something stronger, a life of softness and courage, a love that refused to be silenced.